dive into code or anything, you didn't need to bring your laptop to see more the technical part. We are going to go in depth, but more that it's still feasible for everyone to follow. I want to ask, who's going to start with you? Eddie on stage. So thanks all for being here. I hope you guys know a bit more about blockchain.
Hello, my name is Edward, and yeah, just to start off, I was wondering how many of you were actually here in the first session, if you could. Okay, good.
Nice.
So it's nothing really complicated compared to the first session, so even those who weren't here can catch up. In this meetup, we're going to talk about the blockchain technology in depth. What this means is actually we're going to go over what we presented in session 1. We're going to explain it a little bit more in depth and then introduce more topics. After this session in session 4, we're going to talk about smart contracts, wallets, coins, and decentralized apps and how they work. So if we go into it, I'm going to start talking about hashing. As we showed in the first presentation, it's called a blockchain because the blocks which contain data are cryptographically linked to each other. What this means is each block has a reference to the previous block. And this goes on for every block in the chain. What hashing is, it's the equivalent of a human fingerprint, but for a digital document or entity. What a hashing function does, we're going to talk about SHA-256, which is one of them. It's not the only one. It translates a document into that code, which is actually a number, but we'll go in depth into that later. So the features of an algorithm like this is it should be one way, so it should only go from a entity to a code. No, you cannot translate the code back into an entity. Deterministic, so if you put in the same thing twice, you get the same output twice. And it should have an avalanche effect. So if you have a document and you change one bit out of it, then the whole hash changes and it has nothing to do with the original one. A new topic we're introducing is it must withstand collision. So the number of hashes is limited. It has only 64 digits, and that means it has a limited number of combinations, but the number of things we can input into it is infinite. So at some point we will have some collision. It will be the same hash for two different things. The problem is, however, when someone can intentionally put in something that yields the same hash. And that should be very complicated, almost impossible actually. And it is so impossible with a hashing function that out of 1 billion attempts, so if you hash 1 billion things, then the chance is 1 in that, which is 1 in this, the equivalent, which actually, to put it into perspective, is actually more likely to get hit by an asteroid than get the same hash. Immutable ledger. This one, we went through it in the first session as well, and not much is there to say about it, except that, let's say, if you had a paper or a contract which stated that some house is yours, someone could tamper with the contract and say the house is theirs. And if there was only one copy, you couldn't prove that the house was actually yours. Now, if we would put that in a blockchain and someone would try to tamper with it and edit the name, let's say, then the hash of this block would change. And as I showed in the first slide, then this block here, the first red one, wouldn't point to that block anymore. So something would be wrong and people would notice. Now, that's not entirely safe because someone could just go and hack all the other following blocks as well. And even if it's not easy, it's still possible. But that's when decentralization comes into place, and Boss is going to talk about that.
So yes, we have these documents, but we need to have some kind of way to decentralize them or distribute them against all limited information. So I want to give some kind of analogy, again, some kind of history. We have this castle, and we have 4 knights who all have a small army, and they all want to attack the castle. And they need some kind of messaging system to attack at the same moment. and they all need, more than 50% of them need to attack the castle before there can be a victory. So the way they send messages out was via a courier or via a bird. So one of them sends a message to another one. There was one problem, however. Sometimes people were malicious or knights and want to attack, or they had some kind of intruder from within the castle. They tried to salvage or sabotage the attack. So, for example, we have this guy who doesn't want to be in the fight, so he goes away, he flees, and he doesn't attack with the rest of us. But they still need some kind of system to trust each other, that they can attack at the same time, even if there's one guy malicious. So even if one guy says, no, I don't want to fight, they still need to be able to attack with the three of them. So to give an example, if one guy thinks, okay, this is a good time to attack, he sends out a message to all the three other knights via courier or via knight, and they all respond back, so they relay the message. So this guy sends out his message to the other knights, the right one also does it for the other guys, and so on, until we get to the malicious guy, and he says, no, we're not gonna attack. I don't wanna attack, we don't wanna do this. But the way the system worked was that they counted the amount of times they received a message from yes, attack, or no, don't attack, and based on that decision, they went to attack. So for this guy, you have 1 no and 2 yeses. So they did attack. For that guy as well, he also attacked. The top right one also attacked. And the top left one didn't want to attack, so he's just out of the picture. And he flees. And so with the 3 of them, they can still attack at the same time and conquer the victory. So now you think, how does this translate to a digital age? And that's with kind of the same system. So you have these computers who all have a ledger and they all want to communicate what is the truth, or like what kind of, for example with Bitcoin, if they want to send a coin instead of sending an attack. So we also have one malicious guy who sends out maybe a malicious coin, so maybe a malicious transaction, like he sends out 10 euros, for example, to his friends, but he doesn't even have 10 euros. And the other guys all say, oh, this is not true, so they still can have a full agreement on the network. There's one failure of this though. If more than 50% are malicious and they want to do an attack, they can overcome this system. So now we know a little bit about hashing, about the ledgers, about the information they have, and how it's distributed against all other people. And now we're going to talk about the types of blockchain. So how are these people communicating? The first one and the most well-known one is the public blockchain. It's also used by Bitcoin. And you can see that all the computers in the network can both edit the blockchain, so they can send transactions, and they can also read the blockchain. So they can see the whole ledger, see what they are doing, and what kind of money is being sent to who. If you're from the outside, you can see the ledger, you can validate everything, and if you want, you can also join, just by downloading the program and downloading the ledger. The second one is federated. This is usually used by companies, like for example a supply chain management system. So the nodes in this example would be the farmer, the factory, and the seller of the chocolate, for example. They can all see and edit the blockchain. Also from the outside, you can see that ledger, you can validate every transaction that it's truthfully and honest. But if you want to join every node in the system, as you say, okay, you can join. The last one is private, and this is a secluded blockchain, and people from the outside can't see it, can't join it. This is, for example, done via banking. The banks in between send money or send data. So we have these public and federated blockchains, and they have downsides and upsides to each of the systems. The public is a lot slower because there are a lot more nodes in the network that all need to validate the transactions, while federated one can only have a few nodes that are trusted and validate the blockchain. And you can see with that comes at the cost of a managed upkeep and a bit more less trust in the system. Then we go to nodes, and the nodes are actually the people who hold the data, who hold the transactions. So actually just the computers in the network. You have a node, and a node is somebody who's interacting with the network. So they can be viewing the blockchain, viewing the ledger, We have a full node, that's somebody who has a record of the whole ledger. And we have a root node. This is the guy that started the blockchain. So there's always one beginning, one origin of the blockchain. For example, here's a visualization of blockchain, of Bitcoin, sorry. You can see in 2009 we have begun at the center and slowly spreading out over time, adding more transactions, adding more layers. Here you can see the biggest nodes in the network, so the people who hold the most transactions or the most money, and the biggest transactions between each of these nodes. So there are like millions more, but these are just the biggest. And for example, here you can see how they transferred money from each other. So now we know that people have the wallets, so that people have the ledgers, that it's decentralized, how they're arranged, and how they communicate with each other. But how do they actually come to an agreement? Like, what system does a computer use that they agree with each other? And we have consensus methods for that. There are a lot. We're going to first talk about proof of work, which is also used by Bitcoin and is the most well known. And Eddie's going to talk about it.
So proof of work is one of the consensus methods that are actually used out there, and it's based on the fact that participants, in this case miners, have to prove that their computers did some work. How they do that is, actually I'm going to explain some parts of the proof of work method, and they would make sense together. The most important part is the mining competition. So they have to mine the next block. They all want to do this, right? So the blockchain says, actually before I say that, I have to tell you that the hash we've been talking about up until now is actually a number, but it is in hexadecimal. So it has numbers from 0 to 9 and letters from A to F. But the thing is, it's a number, so it can have values bigger than it and smaller than it. So the blockchain says, find the combination that when hashed, it yields something that's smaller than this. And then we have the nodes, the participants in the network. And they all want to mine the next block. So they start mining. What that means is they take some data from the previous block, they combine it with some random numbers that the miner chooses that range from 1 to 4 billion. And they put it in this hashing algorithm, the SHA-256 we were talking about earlier. And this algorithm spits out some hashes. And it's by pure chance that this hash would be smaller than the number the blockchain gave. So the ranges that this hash can have range from the maximum FFFF and the minimum 000. And that number is somewhere, let's say, over here. In reality, already starting with like 8 zeros, or what is there, is not even visible on this scale, but for the sake of the presentation, it's going to be there. Then this hashing algorithm will spit up some random hashes. In this case, it's about 4, 5, 6, but in real life, it's to the number of billions or trillions. And at some point, one of the nodes will pop up a hash which is smaller than the number the blockchain specified. At that point, that guy is said to have found a number and mined successfully the block. Why does the number have to be smaller than something and not exact? We're going to explain now. And it all takes back to the difficulty of a block of mining. Let's say the difficulty is somewhere over here at the beginning of the blockchain, and as blocks are mined, the difficulty increases and the hash decreases. So the chance someone would get of spitting out something smaller than the specified number from the blockchain is smaller with time. So it grows smaller and smaller. Right now, in the actual blockchain network, it's like 9 or 10 zeros already, so it's really, really difficult. But yeah, why find something that's smaller than a number and not the exact number, as probably most of you thought until now that they have to match the exact hash. It takes us back to the asteroid problem, that it's so unlikely to find the exact matching number that when hashed yields the same hash, that it's not likely at all for anyone to ever find it. Now, why have a difficulty increase or decrease? Really, it's up to the creators of the blockchain, any blockchain platform, to decide that. Some of them might want to not have a fast source of coins or tokens join the network at once, so they want to gradually supply the coins to the participants. But a better use case, or something that's actually used in real life, is the Bitcoin use case. They want to slow down or speed up mining frequency so that the average time needed to mine a block is 10 minutes. So if it's faster than 10 minutes, they increase the difficulty, and if it's smaller than 10 minutes, they lower the difficulty. Now this is the actual graph of the blockchain difficulty, of the Bitcoin difficulty. And it was pretty low at the inception up until 2014. And it ended up this July or August around 7 trillion times bigger than its inception. So it would take 5 billion times more hashing power and time to mine a block nowadays compared to the inception. Fees. What are fees? We probably all think that we need to send fees together with our transactions to the blockchain to get them accepted and pay the miners. But I would like to start by saying that fees are completely optional, and they've become something so regular nowadays because people choose to give them away so easily. How fees work is, let's say we have the miner who's trying to find the hash. And we have the block that will be mined soon, or next actually. And for the sake of simplicity, let's say that this block has enough space in it to store 3 transactions. Then we have a bunch of people here who want to put their transactions into the blockchain. So each one of them has some data they want to put in, and they have a fee that they want to pay to the miners. Now it's in a miner's best interest to choose the transactions that have the most fees, because when he mines a block, he will also get all the fees that the transactions had with them. So of course the miner will choose first the transaction with the most fees, and then the next one, and then the next one. And that leaves this block, if he successfully mines it, with 3 transactions and 2 pending transactions from people that didn't make it into the block. So those people now have to wait for the next person to mine the block and hope that they will be included. Mining pools. To say we have 6 nodes, 6 participants that are mining with, let's say they make 5 hashes per second. So 5 combinations per second. And at some point, some of them gather and say, "Oh, we want to have a bigger chance at mining the next block than our competitors." So what they do is they work together, and they have 20 hashes per second. And by doing this, they have a chance 4 times bigger than the rest of the participants to mine the next block. This is actually happening in real life, and in the Bitcoin network, at least 80 or 90% of the mined blocks are mined by pools, not by individual participants. And what happens in this case is after they mine a block, they split the reward based on how much they contribute to the pool, how many hashes per second they contribute to the total sum that the pool has. The rest of the consensus methods, Bas is going to talk about.
Yeah, so proof of work is not the only consensus method that's out there. There's a lot of downsides as well. As you might know, it takes up a lot of energy. So one of the first one that has been introduced is proof of stake. And instead of mining, it's based on it's based on a lottery. And the much more coins you have, the bigger percentage you have on winning the lottery. So everybody puts in their coins, their stake, and the algorithm chooses one randomly. And as we discussed before with the fees, instead of having the coin as a reward, you get the fees that people put in. So this guy gets selected and he gets the coins as a reward. Yeah. Proof of burn is kind of similar, it's a combination of these two, but instead of having the most coins, it's who burns the most coins. And this is also for the economics, because the people want to get money out of the circulation, or coins out of the circulation, to decrease the inflation. And this also uses a lot less energy than the previous methods. And the last one I want to say, this has been very recently, is proof of elapsed time. And instead of spending coins, mining, or burning money, you just wait. So the guy that has waited the longest in line, he can pick the next block and he gets the fees as a reward. There are plenty of more, there are like 1,000 different consensus methods now, but these are the most used and most well known. And as the last time, Eddie's going to talk about the forks.
A lot of action.
So forks. Forks happen when people think there's time for a change in the code of a blockchain. A blockchain is just a piece of code, right, which runs, kind of a database. So its code can be changed and the way it runs can be changed. Now there's two types of forks, hard forks and easy, soft forks. In soft forks, the original code, which is this, will have a bunch of new rules that people want to add to it. The difference between this and hard forks is that soft forks are compatible, the new system is compatible with the old one. So it kind of gets incorporated in the code of the original blockchain, and it might add some things to it. Now, of course, since it's compatible, new blocks can just be added like before. A good example could be that if we had a blockchain which could store 3 transactions as before, and a new rule came, a soft fork, which would say we want to increase this to 4, then that's completely fine with new blocks, because we can add a 4th transaction. But at the same time, that's still compatible with the old rules, because 3 transactions fit into a block that can hold 4 transactions as well. Now, if we look at hard forks, we have a bunch of new rules that are not completely or not at all compatible with the original rules. So when they try to merge, it actually doesn't work. So what developers have to do is Pac-Man and create a new blockchain entirely. No, I'm lying. It's not actually creating a new blockchain. It's actually forking, and the original one can just keep on going, but there's a fork which remembers what the previous blocks were, but the new blocks have a new rule, and the new consensus has new rules. A good example of this could be that if we had the same blockchain which could hold 3 transactions, and we would have a hard fork which would cut one transaction space from the blocks, then that would be completely fine with the following blocks. But if we looked at the previous blocks, then we would have to cut out some of the transactions, which is not that good. And that's why a new set of blocks is required. That was all for the presentation of today. Thank you so much for listening and being here. And we can move to the questions. If you want, we have a discussion.
Increasing difficulty when you say you have to guess a new hash which is lower than a certain value, that you have a lot of chance of waste. Or is that not the correct way to look at it? So, for instance, you start at the top and you say you have to guess, or you have to come up with a hash which is lower than this one, and say you come up with a hash which is nearly at the bottom, that's the next hash, which should be again below that. Or is that by and therefore wasting the chance to get a hash which was between the hash you guessed and the limit you set? Or is it not
So if you get a hash which is lower than this, then, or if you get something that's very, very low, or
no, it's just very, very low, which would theoretically, if the next hash has to be again lower than the hash you just created,
yeah,
like
but
theoretically wastes all the hashes in between.
Yeah, that would go to waste, yeah.
that's
Just
going to waste because
new
the
ones.
previous block info would change. So the hash would change as well because you're changing something in the thing you put into the algorithm. So the spit out algorithm hash changes completely. So yeah, it would go to waste. And that's why proof of work is very power hungry because you have to do a lot of work for nothing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So in the example you say you store the transactions on the blocks, right? But when it becomes harder and harder to mine new blocks and you still want to do transactions, then how does it work?
The thing is, it gets harder to mine transactions, to mine blocks, but it should take still 10 minutes per block, and a certain block can hold maybe 1,000 or 2,000 transactions. I'm not sure, but the difficulty increases and decreases, so that the time to mine a block is still 10 minutes. So it adjusts, so it doesn't take longer for people to get their transactions in.
So speed is constant.
Yeah. So if miners, for example, had a sudden drop, it was a sudden drop of miners, then the difficulty would automatically adjust so that it still takes 10 minutes for a block to be mined. Is that clear? Or am I saying? Yeah.
The graph you showed with the mining, that graph, why is it decreasing so fastly after July 17?
Here,
Decrease in Bitcoin in value, so a lot of people who are mining for money, they don't want to contribute anymore.
Okay.
So it's less, you need to pay more money or pay more energy to mine one Bitcoin, and when the value of the coin is decreasing, then they don't want to mine anymore. That's why GPUs are getting cheaper now as well.
So if the value is going up, the graph will go up as well.
Yeah, probably, yeah, because more people want to mine them.
Who's controlling the difficulty?
Sorry?
Who's controlling the difficulty?
It's
No.
automatically.
it's programmed.
Alright.
Yeah.
So it's not here. We didn't put the formula here, but it's actually dividing the time it takes to mine a block, the average for the past 2016 blocks, by the time it should actually take, so 10 minutes. And then it sees how much of a percentage it should increase or decrease, so it takes 10 minutes.
So that's controlled as someone's phone.
It was programmed at its inception, so no one can change that anymore.
For Bitcoin, they said at the beginning we want a block every 10 minutes. They made an algorithm that makes sure that every 10 minutes a block that spits out, so that it gets constant as well.
So it's a set of rules that everyone knows, and if they agree to them, they can use Bitcoin. If they don't agree, they can fork it, or use a
Or use
different
it, yeah.
blockchain.
Does the hash which is going to be found, so to say, have to have anything to do with the content which is going to be placed within the block, or is it like being afterwards that the, how do you say, the hashes fold to the content, so it will produce the hash?
I didn't get what countdown you mean.
Now the content, like you are mining new blocks, put some new content in, but can you know what the hashes will be, since the previous block and the new content will make the new hash. If you don't know what the content will be, which is going to be in the new block, do you then know?
If you don't know what the content will be put in the block, then you cannot know what the hash will be.
So that's always this like determined which content will be in the next block, and by also the system you set, like the one who's paying the most will probably get a space in the new block, and then based on that content, a new hash has to be found.
No, it's based on the previous block. And then they determine what content goes in the new block. And then the miner, after he's mined the previous block, gets to mine the next block.
So the data that they put into the algorithm is data from the previous block. usually. They can put whatever they want in there. But usually what they do is put in data from the previous block because it's random enough and just some numbers after. Because whatever you put, if you put your name, your mother's name, or some numbers, it's the same thing. You don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, so they actually kind of have to guess which information will be put into the new block to come up with the exact hash which is going to be produced with the new content which is going to be added to the block.
What is your opinion on the different consensus methods? What would you say is?
We got proof of stake, because Bitcoin is so power hungry, but there's also some people argue that getting the work in, so that, let me explain it differently. Like proof of stake, if you own half of the coins, you can completely destroy the whole blockchain from like 1 to 0, from 1 to 100. But with Bitcoin, you can't, because there's so much energy and power in, you can probably only change or alter the next block or the next iteration. So that's one argument that why Bitcoin is better, but it's using so much energy. It's not really like a decentralized new world kind of thing. It's not really focusing on that. But yeah, the other ones all have different applications, methods. So there's not really to say that one is better than the other.
Is it possible for anyone who is part of the blockchain to make a fork?
Yeah. You don't even have to be part of the blockchain. You can just copy everything and write some different code for it.
You can copy paste the source code, run it yourself, and then you have a fork. But then you have people that use your fork.
Or you can use it yourself.
Just me. Yeah.